Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is David and I am delighted to be joined by Matthew Bailey, MVP, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Architect and Trainer, Noteworthy Technology USA, who will be talking to you today about Microsoft Teams, the power of bringing people together. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is #ESPC20. Don't forget to check out the Resource Center. This is the updated daily with latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit europeansharepoint.com and click the content link at the top. Interested in taking part in ESPC 20 in Amsterdam this November? Call for speakers is now open at sharepointeurope.com, where you can also find details of our 30% ticket discount offer, which ends on Thursday, 27th of February. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answer session. Type any questions you have in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'll pass you over to our webinar presenter, Matthew Bailey. Hello, Matthew.
Today.
Hi, Matthew. I'm well.
All right. Let me see here. Just figure out how to share my screen here.
Sorry, Matthew. I'm just sharing it with you now.
Here we go.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming to hear me speak a little bit about Microsoft Teams. Once again, my name is Matthew Bailey, Matthew J. Bailey, just because at least in the United States, there's a whole lot of people named Matthew Bailey, so I try to put my middle initial in there so you can find me out on the Google and such. But I am a Microsoft MVP and an MCT, as well as an MCSE, MCSA, and all those other tests that we all take to try to advance our career and become Microsoft Cloud pros. I have actually now I'm up to about 9 Microsoft Teams deployments. But in addition to that, I come more from a SharePoint background, which is now going on like 12 to 13 years, because that was back in 2007 I started with SharePoint, and I have worked with Office 365 and Azure for over 5. I'm also the co-author of a book called Mastering Microsoft Teams, which I'll show you on the next slide, although the book is a little bit old, because we published it when Teams was very brand new. I wrote it with one of my very best friends, Melissa Hubbard, who ironically, Davis will tell you about, is for tomorrow's webinar, is going to be your lovely host for tomorrow's session. And so if you want just like a nice nuts and bolts, like what is Teams about, or maybe you want to use it to help teach a class or that kind of thing, it's a great book for that. All right. So here's my contact information, but so if you want to write it down now in case you have questions or things we can't get to and within time of the webinar, but I'll bring this back up at the very end just after the presentation is done as well, so you know how to get a hold of me if you have any questions that you needed to have answered. Okay. So today, what I wanted to do was a little bit more of a free-form format. Sometimes when I give my webinars, they're very, very structured and very scripted out. But because I'm traveling, I thought a better way to do this would just to make it a real nice conversation about like the basics of the Teams, the product, the application, and then also all of the different use cases so far that I've come across through working with 9 different Teams deployments at all types of different organizations, as well as my own projects and how do I use it daily, so that you can get ideas of how you could use it at your organization and what it may be great for or what it might not be great for. So the first thing I wanted to do is I'm going to just do a quick tour because I don't know how many people on the call have used Teams or are completely brand new to it. So I won't go super deep, but just so you understand what is the product, what's here, all that other stuff. So I always describe Microsoft Teams as two things, or mostly two things combined together. And that would be what used to be Skype for Business. So that's that calling, chatting, my user presence, all of live broadcasts, all the things that Skype for Business used to be. And then this brand new collaboration technology, which I refer to containers you can create within the product, which are individual teams. So you got Teams, the whole product, and you've got each team you make to collaborate with people on projects or documents or writing books or whatever it may be. And it's a container that holds everything inside of it. So the interface is pretty clean and pretty simple. I've heard mixed feedback. Some people love how simple it is, but sometimes it's so simple that people are not exactly sure how to find things. So I'll quickly kind of go over like what's what. Over here, we have underneath your profile icon, you're going to have your picture, your availability status, custom status messages. This is a little different than what Skype for Business used to have as far as reading them, because you can set it here, but to see it, you'd end up having to go to chat. The reason I brought this up is because at one client, somebody had mentioned that they were using Teams. Their use case for Teams was, I'm tracking who my employees, I'm the manager, I'm tracking my employees for the day. Where are they? Which office are they at? And people would usually just come in and change their status message to let them know where they're at, and then the supervisor could easily see. It's a little bit harder. You can still do it, but you have to come over to chat and mouse over the specific person and then look for their status message over here to find that now. That's just something I wanted to mention because that's one use case of why somebody's using Teams. When you find things such as conversations that are important to you, want to find later, you can save them as bookmarks, which are almost identical to saving them as internet browser bookmarks. You got your settings. Just want to quickly show you this here because sometimes Teams picks up if you put a headset in your USB port of your computer, and sometimes it doesn't. If you ever have to go into to make sure it's using the proper device, then you can. And oh, I already know, there I am. So, and then in addition to that, you can control the notifications to a certain extent, because another big comment I get from people is, I got too many notifications, I didn't get enough notifications. So, and just in case you get any comments or feedback about that, let your users know that in the notification area of settings that you can control that. All right, so here next to this, we've got the red number of how many messages that you've been mentioned at or been called out to, or any activity that's taken place. Now, many of you, especially if you are using a corporate version of Teams, because I am in my own tenant, in my own company, and I help other people too. So I am a part of many people's tenants. You may not have a drop down like this with these numbers and these other things. So if it doesn't look exactly like that, don't worry, it just means you're only a part of your organization. But because I'm a part of all of these other ones, I have many listed here, which is a great way for me to stop for a moment to just give you a few more ideas of how are these other people using these how are they using Teams in their company. So you may have heard of the Collab 365 site. It's just another one of the great places out there on the internet that make available lots of training and help and stuff. It's wonderful as our current host today, European SharePoint community. They're using Teams. They have a huge team where they've all decided to allow guests in to make it more of like a Stack Overflow, for example, where people can just ask questions and post answers and responses, except it's a private team. So you'd have to join it to be able to get your answers, versus Stack Overflow is just something you search for over the internet. But that's a use case, a Q&A forum or a help desk kind of type of forum that's one use case there. Another place that had asked me for some help was a disaster recovery for hurricane services. And that was something where there's many moving parts when, especially in the United States, there might be a situation where a major disaster such as a flood or a hurricane or tornado comes in and wipes out an entire area. There's so many different things that happen with insurance claims and confidential documents and government agencies that all get involved that to work on one specific building that they were assigned to be responsible for the claim for. Another local user group up near Baltimore, which is north of Washington, D.C. on the East Coast here in the USA. They have a nice little community for their user group, and that's how they're using it. Of course, Microsoft, well, we already know who they are, but because I'm an MVP, I am a guest in their tenant. They have a Teams team, meaning that the product group, all of us MVPs, and some other people, the marketing people, we all collaborate and ask questions to each other and talk about new features that might be coming up with the product. That's probably one of the most probably one of the best use cases I can think of is using Teams to talk about Teams, to discuss what's going to be the future of Teams, to give feedback to the product group of what may not be working with Teams, and just getting to know your community. That's one of the best use cases I can think of. Additionally, in the Microsoft tenant, because my good friend Nakia Carter, who has joined Microsoft and moved to Seattle several months ago, and I ran a Microsoft Teams conference in Washington, D.C. last October, and we also created a team to manage the entire project. That consisted of using a planner to map out everything from budgeting, the food catering, the speakers, the sponsors, the different channels for the logistics of the Microsoft Office that had been donated and some of the travel, because we had people flying in from Seattle, including Caruana Gatimu, who did our keynote. And so that was another wonderful concept of how could we use Teams to collaborate all together for holding a conference, holding a community conference. And the last one is a nonprofit firefighting organization, and what they use they have an executive board, and there's all sorts of things that happen with a volunteer fire department, which I myself didn't even understand, but they use it to run their executive board meetings and discuss confidential topics with other people and things such as that. Those are, once again, those are just there's like 10 use cases I probably just threw at you right there. Another one, which I had just came up with me today, that as I was preparing for this webinar, I had thought about was that I am a contractor, so I move around a fair amount, and I recently just accepted a new contract for about 6 months in Atlanta, and I don't know the city extremely well, but I have some friends there or friends who used to live there for a long time, and what I could have done is I could have created a team, and I could have come in and I could have put down each apartment, uploaded some pictures of the ones I looked at, uses the Places app, which you see is down here in the menu tray of a conversation of a team, and I could have started putting addresses in and letting people comment on what they had thought, if this was a good building to move in, or if it was too expensive, or maybe the location might not be so great, because Atlanta's traffic can be a bit challenging. If anybody's been to that city, it's something I'm sure they will understand. Before so I wanted to wrap that part up real quick, because now I've given you just a little piece of what Teams was, a whole bunch of use cases. I'm going to continue my walk around of the rest of Teams, the product, and then we're going to go into some actual examples over here of some more use cases that we could use Microsoft Teams for. So at the very top of the application is just this unified / command, and when I say slash, there's some pre-built shortcuts some people love shortcuts because they're just very fast on the keyboard, and you can type really quick. If you needed to change your status, like I could do this, set myself to do not disturb because I'm in the middle of a presentation, so obviously I don't really want anyone interrupting me at the moment. You can do some things like at weather if you've already installed the at weather app, and I could say, what is the weather going to be in Washington, D.C. Today, and I guess it's not going to be as warm as I thought. I'm glad I brought my winter coat. And then, of course, separately, we've got your search box, which just allows you to search for either messages with a word in it, people with that word in it, or files. And then lastly, just because they recently hear your search results and they move the filters, but you can narrow down if you know what team something was in, or the file type, or who it was modified by. Or other filters here to help you find things, because one of, as we might get into at the end, is Teams is wonderful and I love it for certain things, but it can also at times come back with enormous amounts of information, and you have to figure out, how can I find exactly what I was trying to find? These filters are going to be your best friend as far as that is concerned. All right, so as we just keep going around here in our little miniature tour, this box up here is just to create a new chat. It's very similar to the one that you used to have in Skype for Business to initiate a new IM with somebody. And then you also, and it just works like this. You type in their name, it brings up the chat interface, and one of the pretend people in my tenant here, Chris, if he was online, you can see that we've had some conversations. These are known as persistent, unlike Skype for Business, where they went, although if depending on how they had been set up on the back end by your admin, they may have still been tracked in the back end at your company, but as far as you and your person you're chatting with, those were not there long term. You opened up the window, you chatted, and then you closed it, and that was the end of it. Here we still have over a history of time, and as you keep scrolling up repeatedly, all of that chat history is still there. So that's something to be aware of. Although I believe if you have any type of special regulations at your company where you don't want to save IM messages, I believe there might be a way to try to create some type of custom policy in the admin center so that you can intentionally delete IMs and not save them, but that's something you would maybe want to explore on your own time. Activity, real quick, going to just go through this. With this, I have, there's a few different plans with Teams. There's this free version that comes with Office 365, and then there's also the kind of like the premium, ultra premium plan, the E5 with audio conferencing. So what that means is that I have when I go into Teams, or if I go into Outlook and I have the plugin and I'm in a meeting, I'll quickly show you here, make sure I'm inside the right one. And then if I go up here to do must not be in the right thing because my plugin's not showing up here. If this doesn't work, I'll just go back to the Teams client real quick and do it here. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because if you go to create a new meeting, what will happen is it's going to, in this, after you've invited everyone to the new meeting, it will assign a phone number for them to dial into. If you do not have that premium plan and you have just the basic free one, there will be no dial-in number. They will have to join via the app, the internet, or the application on their computer. And that's why I wanted to mention it to you. So the reason that I have all these people who have called me, and I admit, because it's Washington, D.C., and that's robocall land, as we affectionately refer to it, a lot of these calls are just robotic calls, but you can see that I've had a fair number of people leave me voice messages and things, and if I missed it, that would be there. Your activity feed is a shorter time span. I still haven't gotten a final answer on exactly how long it lasts, but it seems to be between 2 and 3 weeks. Anything you've done or that has had you mentioned in it would show up here. Once again, chat, this is just your messages between other people and your contacts. Any meetings you had that had chat in them show up as a chat also. So just remember that these are not only chats you had with Jenny or Jim or Susie or whatever, these are chats also that if you'd had a group meeting and people were in there chatting, that you'll see that that's still here. And sometimes you may want to get rid of it, and you can either mute or hide that chat if you don't want to see it anymore because it keeps popping up after you've already left the meeting. That's just a little bonus tip I wanted to add for you out there. Okay, so in a second, we're going to come back to the Teams so we can get some more use cases. I can show you all these different things people have used Teams for. Real quick, we've got the calendar icon over here. I want to just make sure that everyone understands that all this calendar is your Outlook calendar. There is nothing special about it that is separate or different than exactly what I see over here in my Outlook calendar. It's just important because I get a lot of people mentioning, well, I would really like a different calendar for the people who are a part of that team, not it showing my own calendar from Outlook. And if that's the case, there's a workaround where you can go into the backend SharePoint site, which every single team has, because a team is compiled of a Office 365 group, which includes many other pieces from Exchange and Office and Planner to make it all function behind the scenes. And one of those pieces is a SharePoint site collection. You can go in there, create a calendar page, and then add it as a tab. And I'm sure I'll have a demo of that to go through in just a little bit as well. But I wanted to come here with the calendar to show you real quick as we're walking through. We've got some more use cases we can go into. Let's say we needed to quickly do a meet now impromptu meeting where we wanted to grab some people that because an important topic had just come up and we needed to discuss something immediately. That would be a great way to do that. One use case that's coming to mind for me, a major food chain has a large risk to bad news or bad things happening to them because they are such a global organization. So if something at a specific restaurant or with a food that goes throughout their chain may have occurred, there is a media damage control room where people get together and they all immediately need to start like turning on the TV sets, seeing how bad the news coverage has spread across how many different channels, try to collaborate with people on like how are we going to triage this damage control situation. Meet now for that because that's kind of an urgent thing. So that's a good use case for that. Other things when you might want to just create a new meeting. So these could be just your regular meetings that you're having that you're going to be holding in Teams. So they could either be two types. We've got your regular meeting here, which you just invite people to, and you can check their availability calendar. You can invite who you would like to it and type in some information about them. You could also hold it inside a team which is one of the containers that I will show you there over in the Teams tab on the left side. And what the difference is by holding it in a team or not holding it in a specific team is that if I held it inside the team, it would actually make a conversation and it would show little circular icons of all the people who attended. So this turns it into an attendance report of the meeting as well as and that as long as there was a team that topic was about, you could hold it in. I like this feature a lot, especially in one of these cases I'm going to show you for a software development sprints for a development team that had an ongoing software project. You can have your weekly call inside of a channel and inside that team, and everyone who showed up, it's going to be an attendance roster and it's right there, but you do not have to have your meeting inside of a team channel. Because perhaps if the meeting is all external people that don't work for your company, you would not want to pick this, because then there'd be issues with security where they weren't a member of the team and wouldn't be able to get inside to do some of the features that were needed. So the rest of the things are pretty basic. The location here, the meeting rooms, this is only if you've set them up, especially if you have team. Well, you don't have to have team room systems, but this is something you need to do with PowerShell or within the admin center, in case you're wondering why you don't see specific locations here, if it's one of those things where you're reserving rooms. But another use case I wanted to show you with Teams is what we refer to as a live event. And we are going to call this the monthly update. What is a live event? So a live event is almost exactly like what we are using today with GoToWebinar. It is a one-to-many webinar style presentation that allows one producer to control the situation, and then they can also invite other presenters. So it may, for example, at one of the organizations I have some work at, they have a monthly update that they do to the entire government organization. And what they do with that is they will have one person be the producer, and then throughout, because they have offices throughout the entire country that are managing statistics of different things happening, they will kind of break it into, this person from the Cincinnati office is going to have 5 minutes, this person from St. Louis is going to have 5 minutes to do their thing, and it can just move along, and you can manage it and control who's presenting and make it a very seamless one-to-many experience. And the difference is between the other meetings and the live events is the fact that with meetings, people can take themselves off of mute and just jump in and interject. Live events, just like this webinar, you are locked down to a Q&A message box. Right now, nobody except Davis could interrupt me and with this call, because everybody else here has a restricted ability to ask questions only via chat. So this is that same concept. And one other note I wanted to make lastly is, if you do decide to record this, this is not being recorded in stream. You have to go about to get the recording a little bit differently once it's done, but you still can get a recording. I just want to make sure you understand that when you record meetings inside of Teams, those go into stream, and these I believe are using Azure Streaming Media Services, if I'm correct. But in the end, you can still get copies of your recording, which is what is most important. All right, so I'm going to discard the changes real quick here. I'm going to go into the calls. This is, once again, you would not see this dial pad if you had not paid for the premium calling plan. So there's not a whole lot here. It's just basically a virtual phone, for lack of a better term. We got our files tab. One thing I always like to make sure people understand about this is that files, this is sort of misleading, because each team, as we go into it, you'll notice will have a files tab inside of each channel already. That is not what this is. This is this is like a user-friendly summary of your files, or for recent files, or for files that are in Microsoft Teams across all your teams, things you might have downloaded. And then additionally, if your administrator has enabled you to do so, you can add cloud storage to other companies' storage to drag and drop files from there. So here you can see I have a Dropbox account, and although I have to quickly log into it probably, let's see if that works real quick or not, but I'll try. That what this is doing is it is allowing me to access my files in Dropbox with this Microsoft Teams skin on top of it. It is not actually allowing okay, here we go. So this is my Dropbox, and these are all the things that are important to me that I save, all the presentations I've done, personal, like my taxes, all these other things here. So we've got a connection now, a live connection to Dropbox, but no, the administrator cannot see this. As long as they've enabled me to allow me to do this, but they cannot come in and see my Dropbox. And that could, because that's a privacy concern. This is my Dropbox, it's my stuff. I wouldn't want my admin to know, to go looking at my taxes or, where did I speak last month or things like that. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood what it was. And then Planner, you may or may not see this on your left-hand menu, depending on if you have depending on how your team's clients have been deployed to your organization. But the difference between adding Planner as a tab, which I'll show you an example of in a moment, and this Planner here, this is a Planner summary of all of your tasks that have been assigned to you across all your teams and the statuses that they're in. So I just want to make sure you understood that it's like the Planner app almost, not a single instance of a planner you're using in one team. Last, then we've just got all sorts of apps from the App Store that you can download. And then just real quickly, because I know that lots of people love to use Jira, that would be an example of one you could add if you were not using Azure DevOps. But there's all sorts of apps available to enhance your experience. If you do not see these, that means that your administrator has turned them off. In one of the government clients that I work for, unfortunately, they did have to do that because these are third-party apps, and there's a security concern you have to be aware of with that. So if you feel that you have a business need for one of these and it's really important, I'd say contact your administrator to talk about it. Okay, now I'm going to go back, and I know I'm going a little fast here, but we're probably got maybe like 10 to 15 minutes left, and I would like to show you as many more examples of use cases as I can to inspire you to use Teams successfully. And so another project I had was for a regional bank, and what that was the SharePoint intranet redesign. So what in this case had happened was we had an idea of what we were going to do with the project, but we didn't necessarily have everything quite as scoped out with the project as hoped. And I think that is a lesson I've just learned with when you get new IT projects, sometimes the statement of works or the bidding process, it's pretty vague because you just don't get the details you want from the client so that you to really be able to just plan things out and start managing tasks so that you could create the perfect set of channels to make this team as great as possible. So we did the best we could, but the reason I'm mentioning this to you is we used different channels, which once again are just different categorizations underneath a team. And how you do that, adding new channels, you just add them, and all you need to do is give them a name, and then if for some reason you wanted or let me stop for a moment. Teams are all or nothing permission concepts. So let's say there were 10 people on this team for this project, but when it came to the financial part, only the project manager and the owner of the company wanted to talk about things. They might want to create a private channel that only those two people are allowed to get into versus the standard channels that everyone else are allowed to see. So in this case, we had all of our channels created. We did our best to figure out what was what. Within each team, you're always going to get a default channel called General, which I admit gets a little busy with some of the things as far as any changes that may have happened are always going to pop up here, and I don't believe that there was a way to overcome that. And then at the top, you have your tabs. So here we've got our Files tab, and just in case you don't know this is just a SharePoint site collection on the back end, which is one of those many pieces that makes Teams work from behind the scenes with this nice purple interface. But the file section and email storage are actually in SharePoint. And then because there are some more features with managed metadata or other things that I think are still coming to Teams, but I'm not sure if they're here yet. Some people prefer to just click open in SharePoint and actually just go ahead and work with SharePoint over here instead. so that they can see the things that they need to instead of coming back into here to work with the files, because it's a little bit more limited. Each team comes with a wiki. A lot of people remove the wiki, but other people use it for frequently asked questions or a mission statement. And then there's always a OneNote book that gets created with each project as well. And then that's where you can just keep your notes for your meetings and all sorts of other things. So we other things we did with this, if we had code that we were saving, we put them in here. Communications team, because it's a big bank, you have to make sure that your things that have to be communicated, we are going to be turning this off on this date. So what's the sample template going to look like? Or we're migrating these things. You have to have gone through them all and triaged and gotten rid of a certain amount of unused data for whatever the time for your communications. The visual design, because there's going to be a different group of the people that once we've presented the designs of what it will look like, as we continue to work on them together to refine them, so we can get to what their desired result is. We could all the conversations and things with that you can put in there. There's actually also, although it has some limitations, there's an Adobe Creative Cloud app. If you were to ever use Teams for working with a graphic designer and you were going to go back and forth with, hey, I like this, we need this design for this, add your graphic designer, and then have them give you some samples, start to, pick one, refine it, going back and forth. This starts to turn into a little miniature project of creating a design, and it connects into Adobe Creative Cloud. That's something I just wanted to mention in case that's something that's you already have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, and you may ever have a use case for that. And then we've got some other traditional things here that you would see in most other projects, the governance documents that you would leave behind, things relating project management, anything to do with time scheduling, or the files that would be there for with your specific tasks, task numbers, and dates that they were due, how many hours have been spent, requirements documents. I don't know if other people may know me on the call, but my first book I wrote was called The SharePoint Business Analyst, and half that book is just about requirements, and they're very important to me because what I've realized is if you don't explicitly make really great requirements, people are going to be disappointed or possibly upset in the end, and that turns into problems. So anything to do with what exactly were we doing, here's some screenshots, blah, 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 anything to do with the put there. We had to redo their search center because modern search in SharePoint is different than classic search in SharePoint. And then of course we had to, when we were ready to launch, we had to make sure that we had created training labs and all sorts of other things. So here you can see Teams became a massive a massive resource for one IT project that I would say probably had a good 20 to 30 people as members of doing different roles. Once again, you can add your members over here with your ellipsis. You just add member. Another great thing I like to mention is leave the team. Sometimes people are like, I'm not a part of this project anymore, and I've got too many teams on the left-hand side of my screen anyway, so why don't I just leave the team? And then another note I wanted to quickly mention was the hide, because there's two areas on the left here. So now I go hide, and you notice how that just goes down into hidden teams. It's not the same as archiving it. Archiving it is a preserved lock of a team. This is just because as you use Teams more and more, this left-hand section is going to fill up, and you kind of have to start deciding which ones am I going to keep up here I'm working on today, and which ones will I probably not go back to work on for 6 months or whatever, and move them down to the bottom. All right, so now on to the next use case. I was hired to create a Microsoft Teams administration course for a training company, and they this was something that was good for creating the different course plans and questions, and their format of how they work on things, going back and forth between being able to make sure that what all of the scripting and everything that I'm creating in before the recording is going to be done is successful and meets the very top-notch requirements that this company had prior to arriving to come in to actually shoot and do the entire training video series. So this is a great collaboration project of we are going to build a training program and we're going to work on it with people together. We've got our documents, we're going to do samples, we're going to refine together. We can hold meetings to discuss. I didn't understand what this part of this one document was, and that kind of thing here. It's another example. Another great example of a use case would be a new product launch. Let's say you've got a brand new project or brand new product for a company that you're going to launch. All the different types of things you can categorize into different channels. One thing I wanted to note is, once again, channels, they're very free in form. They can be renamed, although that makes a little bit of a quirk on the back end, but it's still okay to rename them. But there's still, as far as I know at this time, no ability to move things in and out of channels. So I always try to say, if you're going to use this team, stop for a moment, think about how long you're going to be using it for. And if, let's say, in this case, it's 6 to 12 months, in 6 to 12 months, what is that going to look like? Who will have been a part of it? Who will be posting what types of conversations and files and collaborating on what and doing what types of meetings, and then plan out your channels and just kind of pretend for a moment going through, because if that's going to work, because ideally you would like to keep your content in the proper channel, although I admit that sometimes that's not what ends up happening, and then you have to rely on search to find things. But in this case, for this product launch, you can see that we had chosen to create some samples of some things. We wanted to track all of the, and I probably should have put this under social media. This is my mistake in this case, but oh my gosh, what do you know? There's a tweet from the European SharePoint and Azure conference. What a, so the host for today. But we wanted to track tweets relating to the new product that we were about to launch. There's a Twitter connector that you could add into your team over here and set it up, and then you would be able to track all the tweets for your social media. So once again, you're not having to leave teams, you're just able to see everything in one place. Got some other things that you might do if you are launching a product, like create a search engine organization plan. Poly is a great app that's in there to vote on things. Maybe you need to ask everybody on your team, hey, how much budget do you think we should spend on Facebook ads versus Google ads? You could add the Poly app, and then everybody who's a part of the project could put in some votes. It'll immediately give you some visual results there. And then there you can see there's a whole bunch of other things that regarding developing and launching a new product for a company might involve. Okay, next. We have me and my friend Melissa, who's the co-author book, and also be doing a wonderful webinar tomorrow as a part of Teams Week for the European SharePoint community. We always do well, not always, but we had been doing a nice little skit where we had created a pretend not-profit to save baby seals in the oceans from the plastic garbage waste that has started to consume our planet, from straws and those 6-pack rings around canned products, like a can of soda pop, things like that. I don't know if people are aware, but that becomes very toxic for our planet, but they also damage and harm animals. And we wanted to show a great example of how could we use Teams to build a nonprofit very, very fast and use it for a whole bunch of different things. So we've created some things regarding budget and finance. This is a good time for me to go into tabs. Once again, within each channel, you're allowed to add a tab, and up here, you have all these different things you can add as tabs. Now, once again, if you do not see all of these options, it's because your administrator has turned them off. And that's a conversation you'll have to have with them, because I each company is different, and I don't have an answer for you on why they may or may not have enabled them. But in this case, I had selected a Power BI tab, and the reason I done that is because I'm in our finance channel, and what I had done is I created a Power BI report about how much money was it going to cost to, well, or maybe it's not going to load for me. Let me try this one and hope it works. Yay, it did. You always know when you're doing a live webinar, it's when things break, right? So I created a really simple Power BI report, which I was able to add as a tab. This also could be viewed at powerbi.com underneath my account if I wanted, but as a convenience factor, I quickly had to measure, like we've raised some money for our nonprofit, and I want to be able to interact with how much is it going to cost to save some of the baby seals in different parts of the country. Many of them caught offshore in New Zealand. You can see here there was an average of $5,000 US with all expenses considered. There's still some filtering options if you had created filters. So I mean, this is pretty close to being able to use it as though you were in Power BI, but we've added it as a tab inside of our team instead. Over here, we've got anything to do with our fundraising. We created a planner. Planner, once again, is a Kanban board task management application, and Kanban boards just mean these rectangular shapes. Instead of it just being like task 1, task 2, task 3, you can divide them into columns and drag them around and give them different statuses. So we had things to do with that. We also, which I'll show you in a moment with our website development, if you are somebody who is involved with IT and you have agile methodology, this is a great way to add a Jira or an Azure DevOps connector because this is a connector, and that's a two-way read or write versus adding something as a tab, which in most cases is a read only in 2 or 4 teams. And in this case, we were building a website, and we can get updates from what people were doing to be able to help build our website. Another thing I wanted to show you that was kind of neat about the conversation is when you start a conversation inside of a team, I always open the little A icon down here for format, because what you can do is then besides the fact that you can highlight things and you have more options about posting in multiple channels, which maybe I want to say this sprint is about to close out, which I'll show you in this demo down here. I wanted that to go into the management channel, and I want to go into that particular channel for that sprint. I can just do it once and it will post to multiples. We also have some new controls teams added recently about, would you like this to be only more of an FYI kind of concept, or if you want everyone to be able to reply to it. And then you also have your choice of it being in a new announcement versus a new conversation. And announcements are just big bolded things like, hey, the sprint ends today, which I'll show you an example of if we still have some time, which looks like we're starting to run out. But so just wanted to quickly show you all of the cool things that we had done here. Another company had put out an annual cloud report. What they did with that was each year they evaluate different SharePoint products that come out, and they compile a big report. They hire a bunch of different subcontractors. All the subcontractors have to contact the vendors, ask a big list of questions, create summaries. Then other people get together, create and compile a report, market it, etc. That's another wonderful use case of people all working together. The software development project I wanted to mention to you here, we have this is a common format of the people usually list the general components of the actual project, but then in addition to that, they will list each sprint, which is usually 2 weeks long. So there may be 2 sprints or 10 sprints, depends how long the project is going to last, and everything that's happening in that sprint is going to be in that in there. You can see once again I've added an Azure DevOps connector, so this is live data that is being read and written to Azure DevOps Agile Task Management System. Other things I saw a great use case for was grammar and publishing. At one organization I was at, there was an everybody's allowed in public team where people had to, throughout the organization, everyone had to write reports, but that didn't mean that they were an English major. And sometimes, because these were government reports, it was extremely important that there were not grammatical errors or misconceptions, because here's an example of an article where somebody didn't put a third comma, meaning, which is what we refer to as the Oxford comma, in some type of report that I believe the state of Maine had published, and it cost them $5 million. Crazy, because somebody sued them and the way they interpreted it was not the way it read because of its grammar. So they decided to create a grammar Q&A for the couple of people on staff who were legal grammar experts, and that they could ask in questions inside this, and others could come in later to see examples so that they would know how to do that. Another couple ones, quarterly town halls. If you want to have a town hall every quarter, you could have a meeting inside of this town hall and let people ask all of the questions in conversations here before it started, so that the person running it would know. The only thing about the sorting of these, you have to understand that you can't really control the sort order. So I had to intentionally put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in front of these so that it sorted it that way, just so you're aware of that. Couple of last things, evaluating a software product. You may have heard Valo. I'm pretty sure that they've sponsored EUSE, and definitely some of the people that work there also have been speakers at their conference. They make a SharePoint internet product, and there was a company that I was trying to help evaluate the product with. That was a great idea on how to evaluate the product. A more static team would be like for human resources, to just for an ongoing team that does not have a expiration date necessarily. They could work together with employee awards, incidents, IDs on policies, recruitment, etc. And then the last one I just really wanted to mention before I get some time left for some Q&A is me and my friend Melissa actually wrote our book on Teams in Teams. So this is a way where we used words, co-authoring features together, and we had broke how we were going to write the chapters together in a planner. I believe that we had that up here. We had a chapter planner, like what are we going to put in each chapter? Where does that belong? What should the chapter names be? Who's assigned to it? Is it both of us? Am I doing half the chapter? Things related to our publisher, how are we going to market it? The webinars that we ended up doing to promote it, all sorts of things. What can I say? That's a whole lot of use cases. I think that's what I'd like to wrap up with, to be completely honest with you. And I hope I've just given you guys a lot of wonderful ideas on like, hey, how could we use Teams either just for yourself or as inspiration for making your organization or company that you work at a more collaborative and happy environment. And with that being said, I am going to allow Davis to let me know if we have questions that may or may not have popped into the Q&A box.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks for a great presentation. I'm just seeing some questions come in here. So if anyone else has any questions, as Matthew said, please put them in the questions box now. So I think you answered this one during your presentation, Matthew, but the question, I suppose, just maybe to remind, can Teams get calendar from Outlook and then brackets, not Office 365?
Well, so from Outlook, so you could, I think the only way at the moment you could add and I don't know if they mean, okay, so let me backtrack for a second. So this calendar is your personal calendar, and that's it. Nobody, not Susie down the hall, not your manager's calendar, nothing else. If you want to do anything else with any other type of calendar, whether that's going into SharePoint to add a tab, and then you would use the website URL and then go into SharePoint and create a calendar inside of that, then you would add it as a link, and then you could, that would be a separate calendar that was only available to a SharePoint site. And then separately, each group, an Office 365 group, comes with a group calendar, and you could also do a website link where you could paste a link to that. The only caveats of adding these calendars that are group-based or SharePoint-based is sometimes when you go back to the tab after you've added them as a website link, you might be prompted to have to log in again.
Okay, hope that answers that question for that person. So then another question here from Petri. How can I share Teams meeting video with the external users?
Okay, so first thing to figure out is, was it a live event meeting recording or a regular Teams meeting recording? And then that actually is not, so it that falls into stream, and that falls into sharing via stream, not sharing via Teams, because the back end of, remember, Teams is a bunch of different Microsoft products all smashed together into one, and the video part is stream. And let me see here, at my government client, they actually turned off the ability to be able to share streams externally. So I don't know for sure if you can or can't, or after I've recorded something here, if you can share it externally or not. But if you can't, then you actually would have to download it and either send it to them or upload it somewhere else where they could watch it. But that, as far as like where do you control the recordings, you're going to actually want to come into Stream to try and do that to share things.
Okay, Petri just said it was for a regular meeting.
Okay, yeah, so that would be in Stream.
Stream,
yeah. Yeah, so I'd say go to Stream, and then as you click on your video, so I'm trying to think of a call one here, then you come in here to some of your settings. Let me stop that. I'm trying to remember, but somewhere in some of these settings, you have some, oh, here we go. So this is where I think this falls into, if it's been disabled or not. And you may have to toy around with this, because like I said, the current client I'm at, it's government, and they've totally not allowed anyone to share stream videos externally. So.
Cool. Thanks for that explanation, Matthew. We have 2 or 3 more questions, so we might just try and get through them quickly. Somebody is asking, Steve is asking, will you be updating the book as the Teams products keep getting updated?
Yeah, no, tell me about it. You have no idea. So it's a weekly thing, isn't it? So I know I believe we're still in the process of trying to figure that out, to be completely honest with you. Like I said, right now, because just being upfront, I by no means got rich in any way, shape, or form by writing that book. So it was just, a great way to get news out to people and have and great public thing, ability to speak and put our presentations and such together. But we're still kind of in discussions with figuring out if that's going to happen or not. But it's still a good book if all you want to use it for is, I need to know the basics of Team, I want to share it with my coworkers so they can read it, or you're going to teach a class to other people in your company about it. It would be a good book for that.
Sure. Another one here from Melanie. What is the best practice in naming convention for teams and channels, internal, external, by department, by function, etc.?
Well, it's so free form. It really is going to be more about what makes sense to you, and to understand a few other things. So, the first thing I want to go to is, did your administrator allow anyone to create a team at any time? Meaning, all day long, people might just be sitting here creating teams and calling them anything they want. This falls into governance and training, because if you have anyone can create an Office 365 group, which is the parent of a team, turned on. That means that possibly when you come into this Teams Admin Center as the admin, you've realized, oh, wait a second, I see that we have, where did that go here? Unless I got logged out. We've got 50 different teams that are called test. That's an example. And so the reason I'm saying this is that I think that the answer to your question is you kind of need to get a hold of everybody in your organization and make a group consensus on how and what and how you should manage things. Because at one client, one of the biggest clients I'd had, it was a biopharma, that when they turned Teams on, this is no joke, like within a week, there were 500, and the next week there were 500 more. I mean, they were coming, they were out of control. There was no governance plan with it, and what ended up happening is this, you know, of course, people started naming teams the same things. They weren't in interaction with each other. So that's really, other than the fact that you're limited to a certain number of characters, I believe that this is a governance and training type of and discussion that needs to happen with your IT team and then be pushed out to all of your users.
Great, thanks, Matthew. There are a few more questions, Matthew, but I'm just conscious of time. So what I might suggest is maybe we'll send them to you, Matthew, and you might be able to answer them maybe over email, and we can put them up on our Teams Week page with the link to today's webinar.
Yep.
Cool. So I will I'll wrap it up then, and just say on behalf of the ESPC community, a big thank you to Matthew for taking the time today to complete this webinar. We really appreciate you taking the time, Matthew.
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me, and I hope everyone on the call enjoyed it.
Great.
We're good.
Thank you. So just to finally finish up, just to let you all know once again that call for speakers for ESPC 20 in Amsterdam in November. The call for speakers is now open, so you can submit online, and the closing date for that one is the 12th of March 2020. Also, there is our 30% ticket sale at the moment for our conference in November in Amsterdam. So that sale takes place on Thursday, the 27th of February. And that wraps up today's webinar. Just to let you know, as part of Teams Week, we will have another webinar tomorrow, our last webinar, as Matthew mentioned during his presentation, with Melissa Hubbard, Teams Technical Specialist with Microsoft. So once again, thank you for joining our webinar today. Take care and goodbye.